I mean, the whole arsenal was on display. What a win for Cory Sandhagen. He's kind enough to join us right now on the program. There he is. What's up, Cory? How are you?
What's up, Ariel? How you doing, man?
Oh, what a win, man. Are you on cloud nine right now? I mean, how do you even process a Monday after a win like that? I mean, that was incredible. I'm buzzing over the win. How are you feeling afterwards?
Yeah, I'm good, man. It always takes a little bit for it to kind of sink in for me, but yeah, man, I'm like really super happy with the way that I did, and I'm glad that I was able to just like find a different level of performing that like I didn't really know was inside me. So yeah, I'm like really stoked on that.
I wondered out loud at the top of the show if that was your best performance in the UFC, and I think there's a very strong case to be made considering the opponent and how you looked. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that that was definitely like the most zeroed in, zoned in that I've ever felt. Like least distracted. Like there was, I don't know, man. It felt like something was in the air that night where I was just like, there was no way that I was gonna lose that fight. Like I was just incredibly focused that night, and kind of like that entire week, and like for the past month, just like super mindful, mega in the present, and just like super focused.
I was just going to ask you, like, when does that like, when do you start to feel like, oh, it's all coming together? The stars are aligning here for me. Do you feel like, is there a moment where you feel that in the preparation for the fight where you just feel like this is great. This is all coming together for me. There are no distractions.
Yeah, kind of the way that you said it, where it almost feels like the stars are lining up for me. Um, this camp, I kind of had like an interesting thing happen to me that hasn't really happened in a bit. But I was kind of, because it was so long. It was maybe like 6 weeks ago or something, and I was like sitting in. I had like hurt my rib a little bit, and I was just like tired of being sore because the camp had been so long, and I was like sitting on the couch, and I was like, man, I cannot do this for the next like 5 years of my life if I want to, just because I was just like so being so negative and putting like so much pressure on myself, and, like feeling like I had to win, and just being like kind of crummy, and I was sitting on the couch, and I was like, I'm not doing that anymore, man. Like I'm taking all of this pressure off of me. I'm just gonna live every day like as best I can to be present and live and enjoy this journey while I have it, because I don't want to say that I did this whole thing and didn't enjoy a second of it. So I kind of had like a big major turning point for me about 6 weeks ago, where I just took a lot of pressure off my shoulders, and I started really enjoying this sport a lot. And it like made it so that I can focus every day on what I need to be doing. But I think it really helped out in the fight for this one, where I was just able to focus on performing.
Wow, I love that. Now, were you watching something? Were you listening to something? Were you reading something? Like, how do you come to that epiphany?
Yeah, I actually was. I was listening to some Carl Jung something, but in the quote it said something about like the what the what like what you're doing and the way that you're doing it is important. And like I kind of always like felt I always feel really small in life, like kind of insignificant. I think that it's really easy to have that happen, especially if you have like a big scope on like what the world actually is, and like history and all of that stuff, and how none of us are really going to be remembered in the next 100 years anyways. It can get kind of depressing. But um when I read that quote, I was like, man, like the way that I am living, the way that I am being, and the way that I am acting is like it's important, and I don't really want to go through this whole thing, like I said, with a bunch of weight on my shoulders, because I think that I should be champ and all of that stuff. And I let go of all that stuff, man, and it like made me so much lighter, and it made me be able to fight the way that I fought last weekend. Like I really attribute it to that.
Have you never felt that way before? Like, is this the first time you came to that conclusion?
No, I have felt that way before. Honestly, I kind of felt that way before I got signed to the UFC. Like it was very shortly before I had gotten signed to the UFC, got into the UFC, and then again, I know I talk about it all the time, but because it was a big moment in my life when I lost to Sterling, that was like a big deal. It made me almost flip to the other side of the coin, where instead of being super mindful and present, I started being a little bit more on the neurotic side. But I think that that's just a part of the process. And then now I have found like this nice in between, where I'm not as neurotic as I was before, where I'm putting a ton of pressure on myself and making sure that I'm hitting like every single thing that I want to do right on that day. Like I'm not neurotic about that anymore, but I'm also not this like free living hippie, let anything be the way that it wants to be type of way either. So I think I've found like a really nice spot for me where I am right now.
I love this so much because I feel like I'm the most neurotic person on the planet. And so I'm trying to learn from what you're saying. I also feel like sometimes I talk like this too, but I'm a little bit of an imposter because I feel like it's easier said than done. So do you feel like you're actually practicing what you're preaching? Like even now that the fight is
Uh,
over, are you going to go back to being neurotic or are you really going to live this way?
no, I'm gonna do my best to. It feels right, like in my heart, but like the life is like a moving target. You know what I mean? Like there is no right way to be at the right time and all of this. Well, there is, but that target's always going to be moving. So something that worked for you yesterday isn't going to maybe work for you tomorrow, and that's okay. So that's kind of the fun part about life is just trying to always be hitting that moving target all the time. But yeah, for me, I had to let go of the neurosis, bro, because I was like going down a dark hole, and in camps, I can get into a pretty dark place just as it is, just like waking up feeling sore and being negative and all of that stuff sometimes. So I'm glad that I let that go, man, and I'm glad that I got to win so that I can continue to keep trusting that because it is a much more enjoyable way to live life.
How dark does it get?
It gets like dark in the sense where I'm just like I just like feel like I'm just like breathing off energy that people don't want to be around. And I definitely don't want to do that to like my fiance who I live with. And I definitely don't want to like do that to my coaches and my friends. Like, and it kind of comes, I mean, it's subtle, cause I'm like a polite guy and I'm not like a bad dude. So it's not like I'm being like a giant jerk or anything, but I'll just notice in the ways that I'm like, thinking about people and talking to people and just like things like that that I'm just like, that's not who I want to be. That's like not the type of art that I want to make in this life. So they're subtle, but yeah, they don't need to be there.
I know you're getting married in September, correct?
Hmm.
Um, has your fiance ever told you like, I don't like this Cory. This is not this Cory. He's not welcome in this house. We're not doing this. Is she a part of this, transformation?
Uh, no, because I don't do it as much to her, honestly. Like I really turn it off with Erica. It has been like an issue a little bit in the past where because when I get home and I'm tired, just because I am kind of like a quieter guy, I'll just want to like really zone out and do my own thing. And like that's kind of not an okay thing if you want to have a really strong relationship with someone. So it's been an issue in the past, but I don't I know that all of the people around me love me and like they understand that it isn't the easiest job in the world. So but that's not really like an excuse for me to feel like I'm not being as great as I can be with them. So it's just me trying to raise the bar for myself.
And by the way, I don't agree with your in 100 years will be forgotten thing because first of all, you're one of the best fighters on the planet. Second of all, you're inspiring people with chats like this, but also our producer GC is actually reading the book that you recommended. What is it called, GC? Mindful. What are you reading right now?
Nah, be here now.
Be here now. He's reading this. You
Nice.
reckon we have the picture of the book for anyone out there that wants. So how about that? I mean, the guy working on the show. Read. How far into it are you?
I'm like a quarter of the way through. It's like easy. It's digestible. It's like kind of page by page. There's illustrations with it. It's sort of like blurbs to like kind of get you thinking on life. It's good.
You're enjoying it.
Oh yeah. I'm definitely going to see it all the way through.
Look at this. I mean, here you got this guy reading a book because you mentioned it. I mean, that's an impact right there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's kind of maybe what I had to just like come to terms with too is that because I definitely had been feeling that way, especially after like the last win, like just being like a main event in an arena with a crowd,
Oh,
just like does something that just makes you feel like you're a big piece, to something, like to the MMA community, to the world, to like the UFC, to something. It made me feel like I was like a influential piece to it all, and that like makes me feel good and makes me feel like I'm like doing something with my life.
considering you just said that, it reminded me because I was just going to ask you about that. You were like, oh, the camp is so long and this and that. And I know this fight was supposed to happen in February. And I texted you when the fight was announced in December. I was like, I felt personally offended that this fight was happening at the Apex. So was there a part of you that was like, oh, kind of annoyed that this fight is getting pushed now like a month and a half later, but you're now fighting in front of 16,000 people as opposed to no one at the Apex? Were you conflicted there, or were you totally okay with the postponement, if you will?
Oh no, I was totally okay with it. And actually, something that I obviously didn't break up or bring up in all of the press conference stuff, just because I didn't want people knowing that I was hurt for a little bit there. But man, I had like strained my internal oblique muscle pretty bad, like a couple weeks before the fight, and was like really trying to deal with that, and it was like causing like a lot of like back issues. And it wasn't bad enough to where I wasn't going to fight, but I was going to have to fight like a little bit down physically.
Mm.
So when they said that they were going to move the fight, I was like, oh, all right. Yeah, like this works perfectly. I could just rest my back for a week, and then it got all better and it was all good. So that, and then also just being in front of the crowd was super awesome.
So last time you were fighting in front of a crowd, top of my head, it was, what was it, 2019, right?
Yeah, it was probably, yeah, it was probably a Sunsao. It was a
It was a
Sunsao
sunset,
in
August of 2019 in Anaheim. Jeez
yeah, it
Louise.
was a long time ago. I
Ah,
know.
did it feel great? Amazing, right?
Ah, dude. I wish I could like put that I wish I could just like burn that image in my eyes of what it was like to one just walk out, but two like enter the cage and then just see all the people. And like the stands were really cool too. They were like really steep, so it seemed like the crowd just went all the way to the sky, like it was awesome, man. It was incredible. And uh yeah, there's no words for it. It was so awesome.
You said something that I thought was really, I thought, by the way, your post fight press conference was incredibly fascinating to me. There's something about your delivery. You're so blunt, but you're very honest. And even like if you don't care, you just say, like, someone asked you about like the division and stuff, and you're like, I don't really have an opinion on that. And I like that. You don't just bullshit us with like a 2-minute answer. You're just like, I don't have an opinion. But like the line that you said about, I kept hearing Cheeto say, we'll find out who wants him more, that he wants him more. And you're like, well, at some point, that line of thinking doesn't work when you reach the top of the weight class. That was something I never really thought of. And I'm just wondering, when you kept hearing him say that, like, were you offended by it? Were you like, what do you mean? Like, you don't think I want this? You don't think I'm here to win this fight? How did you internalize those statements that he was making?
Yeah, so I don't really I think I'm a really thoughtful guy. Like I don't like calling myself like a smart guy. I don't think I'm a very smart guy. Like uh they used to take me into like another room when I was younger to read because like I could, and I was like, hey Ma, like why do they take me in like another room? Like I'm not like a smart guy, but I am thoughtful, and like I do care a lot about like learning as much as possible about all facets of life, but then also, of course, of fighting. So in fighting, man, like there's a lot of things that go into being a really good fighter. There's like the technical skill building side. There's like this building this toughness inside you and this like lion's heart that you kind of have to have going into it. There's being disciplined. There's having a work ethic. There's like so many of these things that go into being a really phenomenal fighter, and you have to be firing on all of them if you want to be champ. Like there's no like, oh, I don't want to be good in this one area, or I'll really rely on like Cheeto, for example, goes on like really long crazy runs. um like you can't rely on just honestly you can't rely on just your work ethic, in my opinion, because at some point, again, everyone has the same level of work ethic as you. So what are you doing at that point? Like, are you thinking about what you're messing up as much? Like, are you talking with your coaches? Like, the way that me and my coaches talk is probably not typical, as far as like what you would see in like a relationship of like a student coach. Like, me and my coaches go at it sometimes about like what we think is the right thing to do and what we think is the wrong thing to do. And I'm like a blunt and honest guy about it. And they never get upset at me because that's what we're all trying to figure out here. So that has to be firing. Like there has to be just so many things firing, and like your ability to learn. Like that's like a really big thing for me, is like you have to have an incredible ability to learn and progress and get better and like know how that process works that I don't even think people think about at all. Um, and so like when I kept hearing him say, whoever is going to outwork him, whoever's going to do this, which by the way, I think that I did in the striking, because moving your feet and picking at people like that for 25 minutes is definitely not easy. And he definitely was not really, I don't think, putting too much forth of like a giant effort to like close that distance the way that he maybe should have. So he really wasn't even being the guy that was trying to outwork me, you know? So, you have to be firing on all cylinders if you want to be world champ, man. And, that's like what the top 5 of the UFC looks like. And that's why I've been here for the last 3 years.
Do you think he has what it takes to be a champion?
Not while I'm here. Not
Fair.
while I'm here, man. Like, I think Cheeto's a phenomenal fighter. I think he's an inspiring guy. He comes from a country where there's no other UFC fighters in it, and that's like a big deal. He's been in the sport for a really long time. Cheeto to me is like a good dude. He's like an inspiring guy. He's not someone that I was ever going to take lightly, but I do think that you can't rely on these things that like you do really well already. Like I'm sure that he's had a work ethic his entire life. He doesn't get to really rely on that anymore. He has to like be able to learn, be able to develop skills, be able to like put himself out there in other and he has to answer those questions for himself, but he needs to like know what questions to be asking himself, which I don't think a ton of people get a lot of guidance in, unfortunately, in life. I'm just lucky enough because I just talk to myself all the time and ask myself this kind of stuff.
When you're having the success that you're having, especially early on your feet and on the ground, are you ever talking to yourself and saying, "This is going a lot easier than I expected"? Like, there's not a lot of output on his end. You're able to bully him in all facets. Were you surprised at how much success you were having?
Yeah, a little bit, to be honest. Like when we were on the ground and he really wasn't even trying to get up in those first couple of rounds, I thought that that was interesting. When I got back to the corner, I think I maybe even said that to them, and my coach Christian was like, he's saving it because he thinks he can finish you in the later rounds. And so as the rounds went on, I just started moving my feet a little bit more. He did a lot better job defending the takedowns, but we had plan B's and C's for those types of things. Once he starts defending those, then I'll just be on my bike a little bit more, stay on the outside of his shoulders, don't let him set. And so even when he starts doing good in one area, I'm just going to start dominating in another area. So I think I was just way, way more prepared than Cheeto was.
I said earlier in the show that I wondered before the fight if what we saw between Dominick Cruz and Cheeto Vera back in August of last year was a preview of what was to come in your fight, but the difference being you're younger, you're better than Dom now, you're quicker, but your style with the switching stances and your wrestling and everything, and he had some trouble with him early on, obviously figured it out later on. When you saw that fight and obviously studied that fight, did that give you confidence going into this fight, given the fact that this is the most simple, and I don't mean to be offensive, like you're a better version of Dominick Cruz right now, but have similar traits to him, and he was having trouble with those traits?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, a little bit. I also know that me and Dom are a lot different. Like, we do like similar things well. Like we both move our feet really well, but I fight from a much different distance than Dom does, and I have a much different stance than Dom has. So um, I was curious. I was really curious to see how Cheeto was going to try to close that gap. Because I am a lot. I definitely fight a lot longer than Dom too, and I knew that that was going to be something that was different. Also, where Cheeto and Dom were fighting, Dom doesn't use things from the outside to pick at his opponents and be able to be leading on in the score piece of the fight. But Dom will like rush in and but he'll have to close that gap in order to land something good. Where I don't really have to close any gap in order to be landing anything good, which is like a giant difference of me and Dom. So I figured that that would make a really big difference. If I just didn't close that gap for Cheeto, I knew that he was going to have a giant problem trying to find out how to like get close to me, and he definitely was having a ton of issues trying to do so.
Every time the UFC goes to Texas, one of the big stories afterwards is the judging and the officiating. And I don't know if you saw on Friday, did you see this clip on Friday where the guy is like completely out and the referee's not stopping the fight. I know you were fighting.
I heard about.
Yeah,
I heard about.
I mean, it was completely crazy. That ref worked the UFC card the next night. There was no repercussions whatsoever. Then we see in your fight, 48-47, the Macy Barber Andrea Lee fight was a little bit questionable as well. Like the 48-47 for you is one of the worst, or for Cheeto is one of the worst scorecards. And I feel like Cheeto would be honest enough to say that himself. Are we just supposed to be like, oh, okay, the right guy won, let's move on? Because I feel like that's, like I suggested we need to do more. Like the UFC needs to say, no, this isn't allowed. These guys, the guy who scored it 48-47 for Cheeto had never scored a UFC fight before, ever. Like that shouldn't, like it can't, and now he's doing the main event of a UFC, a massive fight with these implications. This is insanity, no?
That's insane. I actually didn't even know that. Holy shit. That is crazy.
Yes.
Wow. And I didn't know that he had never even scored in a UFC fight. That is unbelievable.
I'm gonna get his name right here. Is a guy 48-47. There's a website called MMA Decision. So I lied, by the way. He did score a UFC fight. It was a fight on that card earlier in the night, the Steven Peterson fight. He has no business. The guy's name is Joel Ojeda. According to MMA Decisions, which is the authority on this, has never Bellator, UFC, PFL, nothing. And his first night on the job, he's doing Sandhagen Vera. How's that possible?
That's unreal. So I have a question for you, because I've honestly thought about like solving this problem for everyone, but I don't really have like the time to actually do that, because I do have some like ideas as what you could do to like make things a little bit better, but I don't have like the actual time to put in to like actually make them solid ideas. But I do want to ask you so there isn't really a universal commission. There isn't like a commission that the UFC just uses. It's state by state, country by country. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So the first thing that you have to do immediately is you have to make a universal commission. Like you have to have a bunch of people that are all on board of the same rules if we're going to make this an international thing. The football players don't go to Cincinnati and then start playing on an 80-yard field. There absolutely has to be a universal commission that if just each promotion wants to use, and I see how that could definitely pose some issues, but you'd have to trust them, probably trust them a little bit more than you would maybe trust like the state governments to choose their boxing commissions, which I probably would trust the UFC to do a lot more than the states would. So you absolutely have to start there, where you're creating a universal commission. And then from there, you can start building rules and regulations and criterias, or adding 2 judges that aren't cage side and in another completely different room. And because that right there would just make some pretty interesting things happen right there. So, or open scoring or whatever, but there 100% has to be a universal commission.
I love that. 1,000%. Everyone needs to be on the same page, and there needs to be more accountability. By the way, what was it like meeting Tim Duncan? And I believe David Robinson as well. What was that like? Are you a fan?
Yeah, it was cool, man. That was like my heyday in basketball when I was really into the NBA and stuff. I remember one of the few games that I went to that was a Nuggets game was when the Nuggets were playing the Spurs in the playoffs, and it was Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili and all of those guys. So yeah, that was cool, man. I was pumped. Those guys are gigantic.
Yes.
And I always forget how gigantic those guys are.
And Duncan's a huge fan. I know he trains as well. Like, he really knows his stuff.
Yeah, I like Tim Duncan. He's kind of like a nerd. I hear that he reads like sci-fi books all the time and stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Tremendous. Love the call out of Merab. Not a lot of people are calling him out. He seems down. Do you think it actually go? I feel like a lot hinges on May 6th and stuff, but it seems like they're going to go with Suga. And I think a lot of people wouldn't have been surprised if you would have called out Suga, because that fight is tremendous. And obviously he's so popular. You went for the tougher guy, which speaks volumes about who you are. Do you think ultimately that fight happens?
I think that, yeah, I mean, I don't really know why it wouldn't. I don't know who else Merab really has to fight, because both Cejudo and Sterling seem chomping at the bit to fight O'Malley versus like, definitely me or definitely Merab, like they seem super into the O'Malley fight. So I don't know why those two wouldn't go with an O'Malley, unless the UFC doesn't want O'Malley to fight for the belt, which I think that they do. So,
right.
I don't think that they're going to try to spoil O'Malley's chance at winning the title. I do think Merab's the better opponent. I'm not doing this whole I'm just not doing it anymore. Like I'm not letting other people's values be my values in martial arts, and my values in martial arts means me becoming the best martial artist that I can. If it means, having a longer path and a tougher path to being a world champion, then that's the consequence that I'm prepared to deal with. But I'm not doing this whole, let me try to find out the easiest path to the top of the mountain thing. Like I'm going to try to climb straight up this thing and make it as tough as possible. So when I get to the top, it feels that much better.
Incredible. And last thing, like I said, I know that you are getting married in September. I think your elbow was a little banged up going into this fight. You mentioned the injury. Any chance you want to fight before the wedding, or do you want to save it till after your next fight?
It's going to have to happen before the wedding if I'm going to fight. Erica made that very clear. Erica made it very clear. And of course, she said she would understand because she's the best in the world. But I'm going to really try to do her a favor and make it before the wedding so that she doesn't have to stress about me having to fight. Because like I said, I could just become like a bit of a different person in a training camp.
And what's the deadline here? Is like July, August? Like how late can you go to the date?
So all the way up to the date, man.
Oh my God. That is very stressful. She can't want that. She doesn't want you showing up with a cut under your right eye like that.
It'd be better than having me be in a training camp.
That's true.
For the wedding, like she would. So at this point, the bar's here.
Yeah.
I just got to kind of pass it by this much. It doesn't have to be a big pass of the bar.
Well, congrats on that. And obviously congrats on the win, man. Super impressive. And just everything, the whole week was great for you, I thought. And I love how you pull up to the freaking arena, rocking the Vans. Like you just are who you are. You speak what's on your mind, but you're not controversial. It's a pleasure to watch you and to talk to you and to cover you. It really is. So congrats on everything. Tremendous win. And I hope you get that Merab fight. I would love to see it. That's incredible. And again, not a lot of people are calling out Merab. So kudos to you on that as well.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Eric. I appreciate the kind words, man.
All right. Talk to you soon. There he is, the one and only Cory Sandhagen. What a guy. I mean, that was one of my favorite interviews. How great is Cory Sandhagen, guys? What can we say about him? I mean, isn't he amazing?